The unspoken rules of Gainesville Courthouse. The air in the Gainesville County Courthouse was a thick, stagnant brew of recycled oxygen and quiet tension. Judge Alden Pierce, a man whose face was a roadmap of sour expressions, had just called a name that hung in the silence: Isaiah Washington. But it wasn't the name itself that curdled the atmosphere. It was the way the judge's eyes, cold as glacial ice, fixed on the man who had just entered. Isaiah, a man whose presence was as sharp and clean as his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, had watched the scene unfold moments earlier. A jittery man in a stained polo and a kid in a faded band T-shirt had both received gentle passes for being late. Judge Pierce had even shared a small conspiratorial laugh with the second man. But that casual camaraderie evaporated the moment his gaze landed on Isaiah. A familiar surge of resentment tightened the judge's jaw. Look at him, Pierce thought, a venomous current of prejudice running through him. Walks in here like he owns the place. Thinks the rules are for other people. His knuckles whitened as he gripped his gavel, a symbol of his power. It was time, he decided, to remind this man and everyone watching exactly who was in charge. Mr. Washington. The judge boomed, deliberately mispronouncing the name. You're late. Or does the clock on that fancy watch of yours run on a different time zone than the one on my wall? Isaiah's posture was a study in disciplined calm. He refused to acknowledge the deliberate insult. My apologies for the delay, Your Honor, he said, his voice as smooth as polished granite. The name is Washington. I was detained on an urgent federal matter. A sneer twisted Judge Pierce's lips. A federal matter? Let me guess. Sorting the mail is now a matter of national security. A few sycophantic chuckles rippled to the front row of lawyers, their pathetic laughter a bid for the judge's favor. In this room, Mr. Washington, Pierce's voice rose, each word a hammer blow. I'm the only authority that matters, and your flagrant disrespect for my schedule will cost you. He paused, savoring the moment. I'm finding you in contempt of court. $950. The sum was a gut punch. $950, Isaiah thought, for being 15 minutes late to a hearing that was to contest a bogus property lien on his grandmother's house, a house she had lived in for 50 years. All because he had been in his office, personally signing the final page of a federal anti-corruption indictment against a corporate predator. The judge's ugly game was painfully, sickeningly clear. Your Honor, Isaiah began again, his voice steady. If you would simply permit me to explain the circumstances. The sharp crack of the gavel cut him off. No, I will not. Pierce's face was now a blotchy red, his eyes gleaming with the raw thrill of power. Consider it an expensive lesson in punctuality. Now, what is this other trivial business you brought before me? Isaiah took a slow, deliberate breath. The air tasted of dust and injustice. He was no longer just a grandson fighting a bureaucratic error. He was an officer of the court, witnessing a vile and racially charged abuse of power from the bench itself. Your Honor, he said, his voice now carrying a new, harder edge. The matter concerns an erroneous property lien. He opened his leather-bound folder. The city has increased the valuation by 40% without legal cause or proper notice. Pierce waved a dismissive hand. I'll get to it when I get to it. We are still discussing your contempt. With all due respect, sir, Isaiah's politeness was wearing thin. My delay was unavoidable. It directly involved an anti-corruption case I am prosecuting on behalf of the United States Attorney's Office. The judge's eyes narrowed into venomous slits. Your fancy titles mean nothing in here. The rules are the rules. I understand the importance of rules, Your Honor, Isaiah replied, his gaze locking with the judge's. I've built my entire career on them, which is why I must ask, are those rules being applied equally to every single person in this courtroom today? A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The court clerk, Ms. Albright, froze, her hands hovering over her keyboard. Judge Pierce's face turned a furious crimson. Are you questioning my judicial integrity, Mr. Washington? He hissed. I am asking a question to ensure clarity, sir, Isaiah replied, his tone unyielding. To ensure that justice in this room is, in fact, blind. The gavel slammed down again. I will not be cross-examined in my own courtroom. The fine is final. We are finished here. "Thank you for your time, Your Honor," Isaiah said, an unreadable mass of composure on his face. As he walked out of the courtroom, he felt the burn of 100 pairs of eyes. Near the back, an older black man in a mechanic's uniform caught his eye and gave a single, slow nod, a gesture of solidarity and shared understanding. Once outside, under the hot Georgia sun, Isaiah knew this was no longer about a property lien or a $950 fine. It was about the poison in that courtroom. He pulled out his phone, ready to call his boss, Camila Reyes. Then he stopped. No, he needed more than a phone call. His resolve hardened into cold steel. He turned on his heel and walked straight back into the courthouse. The courtroom was almost deserted. Pierce was still at his bench, shuffling papers with an air of theatrical boredom. He looked up as Isaiah approached the podium for a third time, his face twisting into a mass of pure rage. "The session is over, Mr. Washington. If you have any more business with this court, you will schedule it to the clerk's office like a civilized person. With all due respect, Your Honor." Isaiah's voice was quiet, yet it carried an unmistakable authority that made the bailiff, Deputy Hayes, instinctively stand a little straighter. "I believe it is critical that I introduce myself properly." Isaiah held up his credentials. The golden eagle of the Department of Justice seemed to capture and magnify every beam of light in the dim, oppressive room. "My name is Isaiah Washington. I am an assistant United States attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. For the past 12 years, my primary focus has been prosecuting public corruption and federal civil rights violations." Every drop of color evaporated from Judge Pierce's face. The petty courtroom tyrant, puffed up with arrogance just moments ago, vanished. In his place was a pale, slack-jawed man who looked as if he had just watched his own house burn to the ground. "The reason I was late," Isaiah continued, his tone now cold and clinical, "was to sign the final indictment in a federal anti-corruption case. And while I was waiting for my turn, I couldn't help but observe certain discrepancies in your rulings." He held up the small leather-bound notebook he'd been carrying. "So I took notes. I documented my own treatment, naturally, but I also documented your leniency with the 2 white defendants who were also late, and the performative cruelty you reserved for me." Pierce's lips pressed together, forming a thin, bloodless line. "If you have some procedural grievance, there are official channels for that. As an officer of this court, I am legally and morally bound to report any pattern of judicial bias I personally witness," Isaiah stated, his voice as hard and unyielding as stone. "And what I witnessed today, Your Honor, was not a simple procedural grievance. It was a potential violation of federal law. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating." Judge Pierce seemed to shrink inside his high-backed leather chair, his authority stripped away, leaving him exposed and weak. You may go, Mr. Washington," he stammered, his voice a raw, desperate whisper. Isaiah slowly retrieved his credentials. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said, letting the word hang in the charged air like a promise. "Rest assured, this matter will be addressed properly." That evening, a single encrypted email to his supervisor, Camila Reyes, set the wheels of justice in motion. "Isaiah, I read your report." Camila's voice was clipped the next morning. "If this is as blatant as you describe, it's not a one-off incident. It's a pattern. This is systemic rot." "It is," Isaiah confirmed. "All right," she said. "I'm forwarding your report to the Judicial Conduct Commission. This is happening, and it's happening now." Her tone softened for a moment. "Get everything. Dig into his entire case history. When this storm breaks, I want us to be the ones holding the lightning." Isaiah dove into years of public records, and a sick, undeniable pattern bled from the pages of Judge Pierce's rulings. Fines for minor infractions were consistently and shockingly 5 times higher for black and Hispanic defendants. White defendants cited for the exact same offenses were overwhelmingly let off with a simple warning or minimal fine. The commission descended on the Gainesville courthouse. Investigators in unassuming suits began conducting quiet interviews. They struck gold faster than they ever anticipated. The court clerk, Ms. Albright, a nervous middle-aged woman, finally pulled one of the lead investigators aside. "There's something you need to see," she whispered, her hands trembling as she unlocked the bottom drawer. She pulled out a small, worn, spiral-bound notebook. "Ma'am, you took an incredible risk keeping this," the investigator said, his voice gentle. "Why?" Miss Albright clutched the notebook to her chest. "I have a son," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "A good boy. And every time that judge would tear someone down, fine them so much they couldn't make rent, ruin some young person's life over absolutely nothing. I saw my son's face. I just couldn't throw it away. It felt like a sin." The notebook was a bombshell, a meticulous, handwritten log of dates, names, and damning quotes. A secret history of Judge Pierce's reign of terror. Her testimony was soon corroborated by the veteran bailiff, Deputy Hayes. 25 years I've been in this room," he told the investigators, his voice heavy with shame. "I've seen him treat people differently based on the color of their skin since day one. Always knew it was poison, but I never did anything." While the commission worked quietly inside, the story exploded online. A law student who had witnessed the entire confrontation posted a detailed, minute-by-minute account. It went viral, igniting a firestorm of outrage. Suddenly, it seemed like everyone in Gainesville had a Judge Pierce story. The local news station's Facebook page was flooded with a torrent of raw, painful testimonies. But one story burned hotter than the rest. A single mother hit with a crippling $200 fine for a broken taillight. She had tried to explain she was rushing her son to his chemotherapy appointment, but Pierce had cut her off, sneering that people like you always have an excuse. Her story became a symbol of the judge's long, cruel, and biased reign. The local news seized the narrative. The headline dominated their evening broadcast. "Bias on the bench. Federal prosecutor accuses Gainesville judge of discrimination." The pressure on Pierce became a physical, crushing force. He issued a weak, rambling statement denying any wrongdoing, but the walls were closing in, suffocating him. By the end of the week, Isaiah's phone buzzed. It was Camila. "The preliminary findings are in," she said, her voice grim. "The numbers are staggering, Isaiah. It's even worse than we thought. Black defendants in his courtroom were fined over 5 times more often than white defendants for the exact same infractions. It's a clear, undeniable pattern of systemic bias." "So what's the final move?" Isaiah asked. "The State Judicial Board is convening an emergency session. And Isaiah," she added, a hint of steel in her tone, "they want you there." Faced with an official inquiry, a media firestorm, the irrefutable evidence from Ms. Albright's notebook and cold, hard data from his own case files, Judge Alden Pierce was utterly and completely alone. The final reckoning didn't happen in a grand courtroom. It took place in the cold, sterile conference room of the State Judicial Board. Pierce sat at one end of a long, polished mahogany table, looking small and insignificant. At the other end sat 3 stern-faced senior judges, the head of the commission and Isaiah Washington. The head of the board, a formidable woman named Chief Justice Crane, slid a thick folder across the table. It stopped directly in front of Pierce. "Alden, we have read the report. We have seen the evidence. We have heard the testimony. Frankly, this is one of the most egregious patterns of judicial misconduct this board has ever had the misfortune to review." Pierce began to bluster, his face a mottled purplish red. "This is a complete misunderstanding. My words are being twisted by a disgruntled." "Do not insult our intelligence," Crane cut him off, her voice like ice. "You have 2 options. Option 1, you resign effective immediately. You walk away from your career, and we handle this internally. Option 2, we proceed with a public hearing, after which we will not only recommend your immediate removal from the bench, but we will also forward our entire file to the U.S. Attorney's Office for a federal civil rights investigation. And Mr. Washington here," she gestured to Isaiah, "will almost certainly lead that prosecution. You will face prison time." The threat hung in the silent room. The color drained from Pierce's face. He looked at Isaiah, desperately searching for something. Pity, mercy, a shared understanding. He found nothing but a calm, unblinking gaze. The fight was gone. All that was left was a pathetic, deflated shell of a bully. A single sheet of paper and a pen were placed in front of him. It was a resignation letter. His hand trembled violently as he picked up the pen. The scratch of ink on paper was the only sound in the room. His career was over. As he stood to leave, a court official stepped forward. "Your Honor, sir, I'll need your courthouse ID and your judicial credentials." Humiliated, Pierce fumbled in his wallet, his hand shaking so badly he could barely pull the cards out. He slapped them on the table and walked out of the room, a broken man. His fall sent a shockwave through the state's legal system. The investigation Isaiah had triggered forced a top-to-bottom review of every municipal court in Georgia. The first seeds of change began to grow in the very courthouse Pierce had poisoned for so long. Deputy Hayes, the veteran bailiff, was asked to lead new de-escalation and anti-bias training workshops for all court officers. "Our job isn't just to keep order," he'd tell the new recruits, his voice ringing with the authority of a man who had seen the worst and now fought for the best. "It's to ensure every single person who walks through those doors is treated with dignity. If you see something wrong, you speak up. Your silence makes you part of the problem.